The following is a Montana PBS learning media offering.
The important part is that Shakespeare was writing scripts, not books. You know, they're guides on how to perform his plays, not necessarily on how to read his plays. And while I think I think reading Shakespeare is important, and I think there's an important literature aspect, but I think the connection to Shakespeare happens when you see the play. And that's, I think, what bridges the gap. I read Shakespeare plays in high school and never really could. I mean, even when I read a Shakespeare play now that I've been acting Shakespeare for 10 years, it's still like takes a few pages to kind of get into the mode and the language and get used to like, okay, I'm gonna have to look that up and look that up. And, you know, it's a lot, there's a lot of work that's involved in reading Shakespeare. But I think when you see it, all the research and all the work, the literature style work that's done, that should be done by the cast, is right there and very palpable in front of you. And you see the actions being played. You see the emotion behind it. And I think that's what makes it accessible to any audience, especially a young audience. I think in reading it, it is a little difficult because it was meant to be seen. And seeing it has such a different effect because you not only have someone live there doing it in front of you, which makes it more easily, I think, relatable, but you also have their particular take on the character, which is something that I can never make in the text, you know? And I've always been surprised, you know, pleasantly surprised on everyone's different take of like Hamlet or Polonius, all the different versions of Polonius that are out there. And so there's just something really cool that happens when it's live, that you can, because it's visceral and you can see them fighting for it. I mean, it's always that thing, like Shakespeare, you know, Shakespeare talks funny. But if we know what we're saying, and we have done the research to look up every word that we speak in the show so we understand the context of that word and the definition, because a lot of times definitions of words have changed over time. If we understand what we're saying, it becomes immediately, I think, clear to the audience. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, Shakespeare's very easy to understand and very easy to follow because it's visceral and it's right there in front of you. First thing I do is read the play. And then I read the play again, and I write down what everyone else in the play says about me. Because that is a good indication of how my character is perceived. And then I read it one more time, and I think about all the things I say about myself. And then I try to look at what the difference is between how I'm perceived and how my character might perceive themselves. And then I kind of look for rhythm and patterns in the speech, to like whether words that they like to use, or if there seems to be a diction kind of thing that they do, something for me to key into as like my starting point. And then I watch a lot of cartoons. I have a friend who does it all off of animals. And so each character is a little different. And so I usually start by watching cartoons because there's such great examples of type. And usually in Looney Tunes particularly, there's one or two things, you know, I always look for me it's like how my character stands really could like dictates everything else about my character. And so I look at the stances of different cartoons and go, oh, well, that's kind of like Polonius in that particular way. And it won't be, you know, I'm not being Daffy Duck, but maybe there's something that, you know, Daffy Duck does that I go, oh gosh, that's so like Polonius, that's so bizarre. And so then maybe that's my starting point. And then, yeah, I look for inspiration anywhere. Like, you know, Renaissance art, I think, is wonderful because there's so much motion and tension in it. I think animals are a really good study, and looking for like, what if your character was an animal, what characteristics, you know, do you share? And then of course the final part is like, how much of it is me? Where do I, sorry, I didn't mean to hit the microphone. Where do I relate to the character? And then what of the character is not me? What are the character's choices that I would not make? And then think about what it would take for me to make those choices. And this is where I feel like me and the character meet halfway. Because I think it has to be a certain amount, you know, of yourself. Any character you create, even in a 4-month rehearsal process, is not going to be as detailed and as intricate as the whole life that you have led. So I think you have to bring a certain amount of that to the role and find out, especially like when you're playing someone like Shylock, someone who maybe, I mean, there was a lot that I could relate to, but there was a lot of choices that he made that I would find very difficult for me. So I just think about what it would take for me to make those choices, and then find a way to see where those places intersect. You know, and my particular take on Shylock, you know, was about my daughter. You know, I tend to, because I'm a loving, very loving person, I tend to look for the love in my roles and because I think everyone acts for a good reason. Even the worst of characters, even Iagos, have something in their heart that you have to love about them. And so it's just finding how I can relate, I suppose, to that character. And then that ends up being my version of Polonius or Shylock. I relate to Polonius because I also probably think I'm a little too smart for my own good most of the time. I have a tendency to talk a lot, and I love to like think things out. I mean, I am huge, like when I have a dilemma, I think it through and think it through and think it through. And if there is a negative answer and a positive answer, I will always lean towards the positive. And I know that's not an often take that people have with Polonius. I mean, he's either kind of a sweet old fool, or he's just as conniving and evil as Claudius. But I really think, like, particularly with our cut, you know, that Polonius, I think he really wants things to go well. I think more than anything, he just wants things to go well. And he finds out his daughter has been messing around with the prince. I do believe that all these, like the breakup that they spy on and the meeting in the closet is all to try and save the relationship that they have started way out of appropriate means. I mean, this is a bad time to be messing around with the prince, especially when you're not a princess, just to relate it to our show. But I think that in my terms, my Polonius believes that he can fix that he can bring the kingdom together, because what's better than young love? And if he can get Hamlet and Ophelius in love, not only will they be in love, but Ophelia will be queen, which maybe is part of the other part of Polonius, that he'll never ascend that high. But I think he wants that for his daughter. It hasn't happened often, but every once in a while, when everything works out, because it's clear, like the cool thing, what I love about theater is that everyone knows that we're not really these people. Our set's made out of wood. It's not really Elsinore. We're pretending. This is a pretend set. We know there's an audience here. But it's this weird, like, unspoken contract that if everyone agrees to pretend, and if you will agree to pretend that I'm Polonius, and I'll agree to pretend that you're not an audience member sitting there, every once in a while there's this really beautiful thing that happens when suddenly you can feel it. And it's like the weight of the room shifts. And together, all at once, we're in this moment where we're no longer actors and there's no longer an audience, but it's this communal understanding and through make-believe, where there's this realization, I guess, of something that everyone has always known but forgot that they had known it. And we have this communal recognition of something that bonds us all together as human beings. And I think that's why Shakespeare is, because the universal truths that he explores in his plays do relate to every single one of us. And there's this magic moment. It only lasts for a few seconds where, like, the make-believe isn't make-believe anymore. And we have this real experience together. And I think that, I mean, that's why I do theater, is because I've experienced that maybe twice in my life for brief moments at a time, but it was like seeing into the mystery, you know, or it was like the mystery that makes us all. It's like a glimpse into the truth of that mystery, and then it's gone, you know, just like a good play, you know, it happens and then it'll never happen again.